A man finds himself in a quiet town where his intentions against his own life become the most exciting event. Because of this, the townspeople watch his every move and hang on his words, while lonely women begin to fall in love with him. Julian Po records his life on a tape recorder as he walks miles in the middle of nowhere. However, he's unsure of what to say about his life. The only thing he thinks is worth mentioning is that he has always wanted to see the sea, as he has never seen it before. After hours of walking, he finally arrives in a quiet town and stays at its rundown hotel. The owner, Vern, is apprehensive about the guest at first, while his sister, Lucy, doesn't speak to him and only shows him to his room. Unbeknownst to Julian, his presence immediately attracts attention. Mayor Henry and Sheriff Leon find it odd to have a tourist in town, especially since Julian didn't arrive by car. Because of this, Leon spends the night watching Julian's window to make sure he doesn't commit any crimes. His wife, Darlene, fears the man might be a terrorist, unaware that Julian is listening to his recordings. Outside his door, Vern eavesdrops, but Lucy catches him, so her brother leaves. The next morning, Julian comes out with his luggage, only for the hotel owner to start questioning him. Julian simply tells him he's heading to the ocean, but Vern wonders if he's on the run from the law. Disregarding this, the nervous guest heads out of town. However, he discovers that the sheriff's car is following him, and there are no other vehicles passing by to ask for a ride. With no other option, he returns to town, where all the residents watch him. When Julian checks back into Vern's hotel, Darlene and her friends, Lila and Dee, gossip about him. The sheriff's wife mentions that Leon thinks the man is involved in shady business, which horrifies Dee. Lila sarcastically comments that such business doesn't belong in their boring town. Later, Julian heads to the bridge over the nearby river to record his thoughts but stops when an old man starts pacing nervously around him. Feeling uncomfortable, he decides to return to his room, where he tells Lucy that the town is treating him like a freak. Meanwhile, Lila criticizes her husband, Henry, for doing nothing about Julian. The mayor reassures her that nothing has happened yet, but his wife is convinced that Julian is a murderer. The next day, even the town's children begin to follow Julian. More and more people start to fear the newcomer, so the mayor finally confronts the man. He and the townspeople question him about his reasons for coming to their community, wondering if he intends to sell them illegal materials. Julian denies it, but Lila suspects he's a fugitive serial killer. The man insists that he was on his way to the ocean when his car broke down. However, Leon points out that they didn't find any broken-down car on the nearby roads. Then, Henry asks for his car keys, but Julian claims he threw them away out of frustration. As his story becomes increasingly doubtful, the townspeople bombard him with questions until, finally, Julian snaps and admits that he does intend to kill someone. However, his target is himself. This shocks everyone, especially Sarah, who is watching from outside. The people ask why he wants to end his life, but Julian simply excuses himself and leaves. At the hotel, he asks Vern if there will be a bus or train to leave town, but the man reveals that there won't be. Vern then offers him a bottle of liquor, having overheard what he said earlier. Julian retreats to his room and fills the bathtub, only to be interrupted by Reverend Bean. He tries to talk to the guest about his life plans, urging him to open up. When Julian doesn't, Bean decides to leave him alone. Shortly after, Henry visits and invites Julian to dinner, but he declines the invitation. Later that evening, Lila visits him, though she acts strangely flirtatious with him. Elsewhere, Dee tells her husband, Bobby, about Julian, but the man is indifferent to the story, unlike everyone else. The next morning, Julian wakes up to find the children still watching his window from outside. He also discovers that his wardrobe is empty, so he rushes to see Vern, who assures him that Lucy took his belongings to clean them. To his surprise, Julian later finds his suit completely clean and pressed on his bed, as Lucy returned it while he was out. Before he can get dressed, Dee visits and gives him a Bible, admitting that hearing about his plans saddened her. Awkwardly, she sits next to him to talk but eventually decides to leave. Even though people are convinced he's not a criminal, the townsfolk still follow Julian everywhere. He tries to ignore them, but eventually, he grows tired of being followed and decides to return to the hotel, with the crowd still behind him. As he approaches the hotel, another group of residents offers him gifts. This leaves him with an armful of items to carry to his room. Hoping to be left alone, the man announces from his window that he will not end his life today. Upon hearing this, the residents leave, wondering if he will do it tomorrow. The next morning, Julian finds the children outside his room again, which irritates him. Because of this, when someone knocks on his door, he yells at the visitor to go away. However, he sees that his visitor is Sarah, who is surprised by his bad temper. Realizing he's never met her before, Julian invites her in and apologizes for shouting. Immediately, the woman shares that she had a dream where Julian was in her bedroom with a knife, stabbing himself. After seeing him in town, she knew he was the man she had been waiting for. With that, Sarah throws herself at Julian and kisses him. Confused, he asks how she dreamed of him if they had just met, and Sarah explains that it's because she has been watching him every day. That's how she knows he truly came to the town for her. In love with her, Julian declares that he will live forever to be with her. However, Sarah states that he shouldn't interfere with his plans. With that, she leaves. Still, Julian feels intrigued by Sarah and writes down his thoughts about her, noting that she is like the woman of his dreams. The next day, Darlene visits the newcomer, offering him homemade muffins. Julian praises her cooking, which leads Darlene to share that she always wanted to be a baker. However, her husband didn't want to share her food with anyone else. At that moment, she pauses, pointing out that Julian's time is too short for her to ramble on. In contrast, the man believes that everyone's time is short, but they end up waiting too long before doing what they desire. These words awaken something in Darlene, so she leaves. Once she's gone, Lucy enters Julian's room to clean it. She is confused by the muffins, so the guest tells her they were from Darlene. Feeling jealous, he assures Lucy that he also enjoyed the breakfast she made for him. However, as soon as Julian leaves, Lucy throws the rest of the muffins away. Outside, Julian finds a kitten in the street. He picks it up and gives it to the barber, Tobias. The older man starts talking about how Julian shouldn't be buried with a bad haircut, so he gives him a free haircut. Confused, Julian looks at himself in the storefront across the street to see his new look, only to catch the attention of the tailor, Tom, who also offers him a free suit. Julian tries to decline, but Tom insists on being part of his adventure. With all the attention on him, Julian starts to feel more comfortable in the town despite the dozens of eyes constantly following him. Later, he finds Lucy cleaning his room, so he asks her to leave to give him some privacy. However, he accidentally scares the woman when he touches her shoulder. Only then does Julian realize that Lucy is deaf and has only been reading his lips. With that cleared up, Lucy writes in her notebook, asking Julian why he wants to end his life. He dodges the question as it's difficult to explain. That afternoon, he returns to the bridge, wondering if the river below is connected to the sea. Sarah follows him, which makes Julian suspect she wants to see if he will jump or not. However, the woman declares that she also intends to join him. She then takes him to the river, recounting how she used to go there at night and think about all her fears. Afterward, they visit her father's grave, whom Sarah believes is still watching over her. The only problem is that she can't touch him until she also takes her own life, as he did. Sarah brings Julian to her house, where she gives him a sweater she made. She tells him she has been making clothes for him ever since she started dreaming about him, and, to Julian's surprise, it fits him almost perfectly. Without another word, Sarah begins to undress and invites the man to her bed. Julian joins her, and the two enjoy an intimate moment. That night, a delighted Julian writes down his thoughts, admiring how Sarah makes him happy. Unbeknownst to him, the woman has been cutting her hair to weave it into her sweaters. Julian then goes to the bar, finally in the mood to live again. He is joined by Stonewall and Tyler, who speculate about how he might end his life. Stonewall believes a lethal dose is less messy than a gun, but Tyler argues that he'll have a rough time if he doesn't take enough. Julian finds the conversation uncomfortable, but the men admire him for having decided his fate. With that, they buy him a round of drinks. This makes him sleep in late the next day, so Lucy wakes him up to give him hangover medicine. After breakfast, Julian heads to the hotel attic in search of privacy, only for Vern to find him. The hotel owner hands him a gun as a gift, urging him that it's an easy way to carry out his plans. He leaves the weapon with him, but instead of feeling encouraged, Julian becomes scared. As he leaves, Leon corners him and invites him to go hunting. In the woods, the sheriff comments on how killing is one of the greatest satisfactions for men. He even admits to having taken a man's life, something no one else knows. For him, the act was no different from killing a rabbit. Leon believes that Julian feels the same way about killing, given his intention to do it himself. With no other option, the nervous man agrees to please the sheriff. However, when they arrive at Leon's house, they find Darlene starting her baking business, encouraged by Julian's words. This infuriates the sheriff with his guest. On his way back to the hotel, Julian is surprised to see a woman taking bets on when he will take his life. The boys in town also follow him, reasoning that they want to see him carry out his plan since they've never seen anyone do it. Reverend Bean also approaches him, asking about his thoughts on life after death. Tired of being harassed, Julian says he hopes the afterlife gives them what they never got in this one. However, he also thinks that if God is real, he has a lot to apologize for. Soon, Lila finds him as well and invites him to a picnic, but Julian has had enough attention and runs away. He ends up back at the bridge, recording on his tape that he needs to leave this town. However, he wants to take Sarah with him, as he feels he has waited his whole life for her too. With this, he spends more time with Sarah, enjoying her company, although he's still unsure if he is the man she is looking for. One morning, when the woman exits her hotel room, Vern sees her and smiles knowingly. Julian then takes a walk and runs into Bobby, who asks him for advice. He claims he has big ideas in his head and that if he doesn't act on them, he might explode. One of these ideas is to become a movie star, so Bobby starts to act cocky to showcase his skills. He then asks Julian what he should do, and the frustrated man simply tells him to do whatever he wants. Dee visits him in his hotel room that afternoon, guessing that he wants to end his misery because a woman has hurt him. With that, she offers to do anything to comfort him. Challenging her, Julian suggests she undress, and to his surprise, Dee actually does. The man then stands behind her, pressing his back against hers. This confuses the woman, but Julian simply steps away after a while and thanks her. The next day, Vern shows Julian his gun collection, thinking he wasn't impressed with the revolver he gave him. He then offers him any weapon to use, but as Vern starts to ramble on about his collection, Julian sneaks away. He visits Tom's shop to buy a tie, and while he's choosing, the tailor asks if he has ever been in love. Julian says yes, so Tom empathizes with how terrible it must be to love someone he can never be with. The tailor then confesses that he has been in love with Leon since they were kids. He cries because the man is married, and if he told anyone how he feels, they would hate him. Julian points out that it's worse to regret something they never did, so he shouldn't let fear dictate his life. Afterward, Julian returns to the hotel feeling like he is making a difference in people's lives. However, Dee confronts him because Bobby has left her to pursue his dreams, just as Julian told him to do. Despite this, the desperate woman asks him for advice on what to do. Now realizing the impact he has on people, Julian is taken aback and simply tells her that he can't tell her what to do. He then goes to Tobias to get a shave, but while the barber sharpens his blade, he comments that he admires how Julian is turning his last days into an art, surrounded by people he didn't know. Tobias says he is also an artist with the blade and adds that he imagines using it against someone. This makes Julian nervous, so he runs away. Meanwhile, Bean leads a mass but preaches Julian's words to the townspeople. He admits that he has started to lose his faith in God, as he has not apologized for the chaos in this world. With this in mind, he apologizes to his neighbors on behalf of God. This leaves his clergy doubting their pastor. That night, Julian finds a tearful Sarah in his bed. She asks him if they can be together forever, and he responds with a kiss, leading to another intimate night. However, the next day he wakes up to find only a note from Sarah on his bed. Her letter horrifies him, so Julian runs to the river, but all he sees is Sarah's scarf tied to the bridge. Despite not finding her body, Julian mourns her as he rereads her farewell letter. The woman believed that to prove her love, she needed to go first so that she could wait for him on the other side. This leaves the man heartbroken, as he thought Sarah had given him a reason to live again. While he cries, Henry, Leon, Vern, and Tobias approach his door, demanding his attention. They accuse him of lying about his intentions, arguing that they trusted him and even made sacrifices for him. Julian realizes that they want to see him die, and they confirm this, viewing his previous confession as a promise. The man points out that he can change his mind, but they blame him for Sarah's fate. Julian argues that he is the only one who truly cared for her, accusing them of simply blaming him because it's easier. Ignoring this, the men urge him to do what he came to this town to do. With no other option, Julian declares that he will do it tomorrow. This calms the men, and they leave. Julian spends the rest of the night reflecting. In the morning, he steps out with his luggage, and as expected, the whole town is already waiting for him, watching every one of his steps. He exits the town, but Leon insists on giving him a ride back, as they want to see him commit to his plans. Soon enough, Julian is forced to put on the suit that Tom gave him and is escorted out of his hotel room by Henry, Leon, and Vern. As they take him to his final destination, the deaf Lucy finds his tape recordings. Despite not being able to hear his words, the woman plays them close to her heart, feeling the vibrations of the man's voice. On the tapes, he recounts how the town gave him a stop along the way to the end of his journey. The place allowed him to fall in love and have a purpose, but he accepted that it was time to go to the sea.